Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? So thanks, John, for, again, amazing event. I thought these events are gone, but it seems Ourcrowd is always back. So it's great to be here. So what I will try to do in the next 20 minutes is try to give you, this is coming back and now, okay, hopefully it's going to work now. No? Should I move to this? Yeah. All right. I'm going to skip this. And, all right. Can you hear me now? Okay. No, it's okay. So what I will try to do in the next 20 minutes is to try and give you a perspective. We live in a very unstable world, is to say the least. It is not just about markets, financial market. It's not just about geopolitical. It's all related and it's all connected. And what I will try to do in the next 20 minutes is to try and offer you not only a perspective on the past, but also some prediction on the future. And how do we as investors or corporates need to think about the reality, the complex reality we live in. So as Andy mentioned, I am a co-founder and a GP in Viola, the largest tech investment group in Israel. We invest across venture, credit, growth stage, and fintech, over 200 companies, and proud to have backed some of the leading entrepreneurs in Israel. So the story is that in the last 4 decades, we have seen an amazing economical boom that was driven by 3 things. One is the globalization, and I'll talk about that. The other one is the amazing technology transformation that we've experienced, and what Alex spoke about, the long period of very low interest rate. In COVID-19, we actually saw a perfect storm, an acceleration of digital adoption, an acceleration of technology transformation, and massive growth across many of the tech companies. We also are seeing the innovation cycle that started in 2007, and which I call the age of consumer, the social mobile cloud innovation cycle, which I believe is starting to plateau. It has created tremendous impact, but I do think it is starting to plateau. However, the good news is that we are living now in probably the early days of the most exciting innovation cycle in our history, which is the AI everything, and I'll talk quite a bit about it. And I think, but like in every historical shift, when you move from one innovation cycle to another, the earth trembles. And right now, the earth is trembling. So definitely 2022 is a turning point. We saw global instability, geopolitical tension, polarization in societies. You know, we're complaining about Israel. I meet Americans, they say, it's nothing compared to the polarity in the US or in Holland or in Italy, and anywhere you speak to, you do see global instability, you see polarization, you see disruption in labor market, certainly after COVID, and you're seeing obviously the inflation and the hiking interest rate. Financial markets are, hemorrhaging, they're adjusting. They're adjusting on the public side, they're very quickly now. As you could see, nobody should really look at 2022. We should really look at the trend. Look at the second half of 22 and you understand the reality. The financial private markets are going down very dramatically, are adjusting to this new reality. I think, I will talk about never waste a good crisis. This is the time for businesses to rationalize. This is the time for investors to become selective and smart, and I'll try to give you my perspective. But as I mentioned, a lot of what is going on now is this beginning of plateauing of the amazing innovation curve. $1.5 trillion of venture capital money were invested in this last innovation cycle. And as I said, I actually predict that the next innovation cycle is going to be bigger. What I will also tell you is that I do believe Israel tech environment, and I've been in this actually now 40 years, not only 30, it's been 40 years since I left the army and took my first company public when I was 26, so it's been a long time. The Israeli tech has shown again and again its ability to adapt to the new innovation cycle, and I actually think Israel is very well positioned to be a major player in this new innovation cycle, and I'll talk more about it. But let's go back to the beginning. How did we get here? So as I always say, globalization and technology are really redefining the world as we know it. Actually at the end, if you want, the end of the 80s, when China opened up, and later on we saw the Iron Curtain falling, we have started to see this amazing global trade. That global trade enabled us to create amazing economical boom. A global, very effective supply chain. When I tell my American friends, yes, you want to do everything in the US, but then you will pay $3,000 for an iPhone. If you're ready to pay $3,000, fine. But if you want the global supply chain, the optimized global supply chain, you do need to understand there are consequences. It has created tremendous productivity improvement. I'm an economist originally, although a software more than that. We always measure things by productivity. Actually, this is the first year since Second World War where productivity in the US has gone down. Productivity has gone up over the last 4 decades, mainly a lot of it because of that global supply chain. But if we go back to tech, so it all started with the internet and the cellular phones back in the 90s and 80s, 90s, and 2000. But for me, the real change started in 2007. 2007 was probably the most important year in the history of the tech industry. This is the year where iPhone was invented, Facebook came out of university, and AWS was launched with the concept of cloud. That social, mobile, and cloud really developed as platforms rather than as a solution, enabled an amazing amount of product and consumer services, and a lot of apps, etc. But more importantly, have created this amazing innovation ecosystem. $1.5 trillion were invested to launch companies like Facebook and Netflix and Uber and many of the tech giants that we know of, creating those amazing consumer services, creating a digital consumer life. We cannot think about our life before 2007. And I have kids, and I'm trying to explain to them, how did we live in a world without an iPhone or without the social media? This has become a global. So China came a little bit later, but has created an amazing innovation around the consumer age with their own giants. And the platform companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook and Apple, of course, they have become the massive tech companies that are dominating the world as we know it. But many, many giant companies have been able to grow to amazing style. It has created some of the most transformative companies that we know. And remember that slide when we talk about the next innovation cycle. All of those companies are the result of this last innovation cycle. So companies like Stripe and Uber and Airbnb and Netflix and Facebook and all those companies are enjoying this amazing new innovation cycle. And actually COVID-19, although bad news for many people who lost their livelihood and quite a shock to society, actually saw an amazing acceleration in adoption of digital adoption. Even my grandmother can now buy online, right? Everybody understands that. But 5G was accelerated. This is the first time that we are seeing a cellular deployment of a new generation in the US 3 years ahead of the original plans. We saw e-commerce, we saw digital health, remote medical supply. FinTech was totally digitalized. So COVID, within a very short time, so we saw leapfrogs of years happening just in a few months. And then the historical interest rate. I actually don't like the 10-year treasury bills. I like to look at real interest rate, which is the interest rate minus inflation, which is the real cost of money. We are actually living in the last 2 decades of an interest rate which is less than 1. When the interest rate is less than 1, you don't really have an alternative investment in a risk-free environment. But guess what? I'll talk about that later on, or you know what, I'll switch to that, sorry. Let me just finish my thought here. So with the interest rate being as low as they are for a long time, there was no real risk-free adverse. When I'll talk about what's going on now, we suddenly do have risk priced back into the markets, and I'll talk about it. So let me go back to that amazing innovation cycle I talked about. Why do I believe it's starting to plateau? There is no new consumer platform that has been released in a massive way since probably the iPhone. You're starting to see everybody has smartphone. There's no more increase. The market is a replacement market. You know, people are keeping their iPhone longer and longer, and actually you can see some decline in the demand for smartphones. I think that there is really no new exciting consumer platform, and you do need that platform, like the PC, like the mobile phone, like the smartphone, like Facebook, etc. So without a new exciting platform, we are starting to see a plateauing. There is a lot of products, actually maybe too many products, too many choices. If you want to go online to look for a house, you have 1,000 online brokers. If you want to use a credit card online or payments, you have millions of options. The cost of acquisition of customers right now digitally has gone through the roof and is challenging unit economics. The result of all that is that many of the consumer-oriented businesses and venture-backed companies are struggling, and we are starting to see a plateauing of their growth. But the more important thing is this amazing tech innovation really changed our life as consumer, but I claim that it did very little innovation in many of the industries we know. If you look on this picture, Ford Model T was the first massive production car in the US 100 years ago. In today's term, it cost $25,000, was driving at 14 miles a gallon and 40 miles an hour. The car underneath, Ford F-150, the most sold car in the US, 100 years later, in today's term, cost $25,000. It is 16 miles a gallon and 60 miles an hour. This is 100 years of innovation. Think about computer, which is 3 years old. Think about airplanes. It takes the same time to fly from here to New York like it did 70 years ago when they invented the jet engine. You know, yes, we have nicer planes, nicer cars. That's not real innovation. And the most alarming thing for me, there's really no new best-selling drug in the US except the COVID vaccine now. But before that, for the last, if you look at the top 20 selling drugs in the US, the newest one is 25 years old. There hasn't been a new antibiotic in 15 years. What's going on? Why is agriculture, construction, many of the traditional industries have not enjoying this amazing innovation that we saw in the consumer life? I claim that the main issue is technology. You know, solving problems in those type of industry is much more complex, and the real change or the real innovation was around computer science. Computer science is all based about linear programming, if then else. That's how you program everything to do with innovation. Guess what? If you want to write a software for autonomous car, it's much more complicated to say if then else. You do need massive amount of data. You need to be able to do non-linear programming. And AI is finally here to enable that revolution. That is why AI is at the core of the innovation that will change our world in a pace and a size that we've never experienced before. The ability to massively, intelligently review enormous amounts of data and make unpredictable decisions that human cannot make really enables the next generation. What is amazing for us in the technology industry, ChatGPT is amazing. But ChatGPT is really not the new thing in AI. It is just making it very concrete for consumers. What is AI all about? When you think about autonomous car, when you think about many of the other things that we saw AI doing in financial markets and others, you're not that surprised. AI is no longer a developer tool. AI is now ready for production. You know, the first neural networks were developed in 1987. They are finally now available. I think the development time, the time it takes us, and every time we saw innovation, in 2007 we saw Hadoop and open source enabling the acceleration of development. The acceleration of development means we can bring new products and new technology to the markets much, much faster. AI, for the first time I can say, and I haven't, anybody who has heard me before, I always say AI is a great promise. Now I'm saying AI is here and it's ready for innovation at scale. And that's quite dramatically. I think the first and most important, it will disrupt the tech leaders. Everybody understands why is the threat on Google search is so big. It's huge. I actually think that the threat for every tech leader out there is enormous. AI is actually changing the rules of the game and is opening up the field for competition. The tech giants have been so dominant with their platform, there was really no way to really unseat them. Now, I think this is the beginning of the big disruption of the tech giant themselves. But more importantly, This will disrupt the labor market as we know it. If we always talked about automation mostly as around blue-collar robots, or China or Vietnam offering better choices for manufacturing, now McKinsey believes 55% of white-collar jobs will disappear in the next 30 years because of AI. When you think about people who do customer support, accounting, administration, many of the jobs, you know what, even writing software. Most of the software will be written automatically. You don't need as many developers maybe as we need today. You don't need as many, a lot of other positions. That's a huge shock, and I'll talk about the shock in a minute, but it also has a huge benefit. We can do much more with less people, which means productivity is again going to go up, which will create an economical boom. This AI revolution will enable, again, amazing economical evolution. I think AI will actually enable us to finally digitally transform industries like agriculture, construction, healthcare, and many other industries, automotive, aerospace, and many others. I think that's when science meets computer science, and I believe we will see a lot of those industries now digitizing. So I do think that while we are seeing this current innovation curve plateauing, I do see this dawn of a new era. It will take time. AI is ready, but it will take time to adopt new business model, new technology, and new product. There will be challenges, huge social challenges. We're seeing the social disruption that we're seeing today, and I'll talk about it. We're seeing profound impact on the labor market. What would those people do? The people who will lose their job. We need to reinvent education. We need to talk about long life learning. There will be a lot of social tension. I actually think the biggest threat on liberal democracies around the world is the lack of social mobility. This is at the core of what we're seeing in Israel, or what we're seeing in the US, what we saw with Brexit, what we saw with the Arab Spring, what we're seeing across the world. We are losing the sense of fairness in society. We will need to solve a lot of those issues like fake news and others, and I believe technology will solve them. So 2022 is really remarkable, where the globalization retreat that started probably 10 years ago, for a lot of reasons that I talked about now, the social mobility, etc., has actually accelerated, and the geopolitical tension with the Russia-Ukraine war have been significant, but for me the most important is the rift and the confrontation between the US and China, which I think is endangering the world. And I do hope political leaders will find a way to work together to bring us back to a more prosperous future. I think COVID-19 had a lot of benefits, and I talked about it, but it has also created a tremendous amount of shocks. Times of unrest, you can see even in China, off and on. The supply chain disruption has been very significant, and the most important thing is the labor market. We're having inflation, almost recession, yet the US unemployment is at the record low for the last 3 decades. So the labor market is going through a lot of shock. People don't want to go back to work, hybrid work, working from home. The world is very confused. And of course, we have inflation and interest rate. Let's talk about it in a minute. Again, we're talking about inflation. What does it really mean? Is there is now finally an alternative for investors to put money and get 4 or 5% risk-free. That's an alternative. That's a big threat. That has not been around for the last decades. So for decades, we really didn't have a risk-free alternative. What does that mean? It means that multiples now in public markets are now back to 2017-18. They are below what they were pre the pandemic. What does it mean for us in private investment? While the public markets are clearly down and are moving very fast, it takes time for private markets. You know, Alex spoke about the realization that you do need to go to down rounds, and it does take time for people to adjust. You know, I'm looking at some of my colleagues' reports in a venture fund. It makes me laugh because, you know, we carry a company at a certain value, another fund carries it still at the original round. So there will be adjustment to do. The denominator issue, which you are all familiar, suddenly when your public holding is going down 33%, your private investment starts to be a much bigger part of your portfolio, whether you're a wealthy individual or whether you're a pension fund or an endowment. That is a challenge, and institutions are now reducing their commitment to PE just to readjust that. And I must say that, you know, while there is, if you look at the reports, there's a lot of dry powder. Well, I don't think so. I think it's a mirage. Actually, if you go back to 2001 and 2008, but if I go back to 2001, about 45% of what was assumed to be dry powder was never called and never invested, because LPs didn't really want you to call the money, and more importantly, there was no supply and demand match. It takes too much time for the companies to agree to a valuation where we, the investors, will agree on. And the result of that is much of the dry powder stays dry forever. So don't expect that all this money is just waiting and within a few months everything will flow back. Some of it will never flow back. That's what we learn. I always say never, and I won't go into all of it because I'm running out of time. What should we do in a crisis like that? So companies should be rationalized. This is a great opportunity for you to be very focused on what's really important. In April 21, just before we took ironSource public at $11 billion, we had an offsite in Viola. And I made a presentation to them, winter is coming. Everybody thought I was crazy. And I said, I don't know if it's going to be nuclear, but it's going to be winter, so let's prepare for the winter. Let's raise more money in our companies. Let's reduce expenses. Let's focus. Let's kill projects we don't have clear ROI. I think the companies will come out of this crisis much better companies. They're going to be more focused, better run, and more responsible. What investors should do? Be smart and selective. Be very aware of the follow-on environment. The building the right consortium, making sure you have enough good investors around you is very, very important. Focus on those entrepreneurs that have the resilience to go through this crisis. But remember, and that's my biggest message to you today, the biggest companies are riding the dawn of a new innovation cycle. You remember the slide I showed you about all those companies that were created in the cycle? I actually think that we will see the next Netflix, the next Airbnb, the next Uber, and maybe even the next Facebook riding out of this new innovation cycle, which is this AI-based innovation cycle. This is the time when those companies are being created. This is the time to back them now. We actually, if you look back on historic, and I have lots of data, actually VCs who have become active investors post-crisis or in the dawn of a new innovation cycle have been able to show historically best results. Talking about Israel, and I won't go through all of that, Israel has really developed a decacorn with many companies have reached a $10 billion valuation, which is something we couldn't think about 40 years ago. But when you go back to the history, the Israeli tech entrepreneurs were very smart in adapting. Where we started with R&D, outsourcing, semiconductor, etc., we moved very quickly to enterprise software, then to the internet, to digital distribution, cyber, of course. But now, the question is, will we be the leader in AI-based innovation? Israel is still the 5th largest, although we are small, and I know we make a lot of noise. With my friends in China, we are like a small town in China, and we make a lot of noise. But it is the 5th largest ecosystem in the world in terms of tech, 85 unicorns across many industries. The one point I want to take home for you, Israel is leading the way in AI. We have 1,327 companies who are basing their transformative investment through AI. It does happen across many industries, whether it is disruption of IT, of course, digital transformation of construction and retail, and many around food tech, around cyber, around fintech, around digital health. There is a tremendous amount of innovation now in Israel. So in summary, we are at a perfect storm. Technology is hitting the world, but we are in the midst of innovation cycle change. Let's make sure that you invest in the next innovation cycle and you don't invest in the previous one. I think it is important to understand that the rising interest and the global unrest will continue, and they will continue to put pressure. So be selective and be smart, but also remember, the biggest companies are born today. Thank you very much.